Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm working on a 2015 Mustang, or an S550 Mustang. As you can see here, we're dealing with the bumper right now. Now, if you own an S550 Mustang, you know that these fascias are plagued with these problems on the tabs. They always like to flex too much anytime you go over a pothole or anything uneven. So you'll know that these tabs will flex and break off when you do those type of scenarios. Even if you're trying to drive the most gingerly, something can happen and it'll flex that bumper. And before you know it, you'll have to be repairing it or buying yourself a new bumper if you don't feel like doing any sort of repair on them and dealing with anything else that comes with it at that point. Now, you're going to want to inspect the damage and what you're going to be repairing. My tabs only broke a little bit where they join onto the fascia, so we're going to be using some JB Weld to fix this. As you can see here, we have already used a mechanical fastener to hold this bumper on, and that's why I don't rely on just the tabs, because I know that this is a defect problem. There's an extreme amount of weight on these bumper tabs, so you're going to want to use something else to hold them up. And since I have a push bar on there, and that puts a little bit more pressure on your fascia because of the brackets that go right up to the crash bar that's behind the fascia, and I made sure that it was bracketed very well. Now, if you're interested in seeing how I put this push bar on my Mustang, I made a whole video about that, with detailed steps on how to build and weld it together so that you have a structurally strong one, and it's not going to be one of those fake aluminum ones that you can buy in Alibaba or something else like that. This is a real push bar that if something happened, you can actually use it. Alright, this is the type of epoxy I'm using. It's a steel reinforced 6-minute cure epoxy. It's made by JB Weld, and it's really good. Now, make sure you read on the back to make sure you take the proper precautions or the PPE you need to make sure you're safe and you're not getting yourself around any sort of harmful chemicals. Make sure you protect your skin and your lungs and everything else like that. You do not want to put anything else at harm. Now, what you're going to want to do is make sure you clean the surface with something that is like a degreaser or something that's not going to harm your paint, obviously. Once you're done doing that step, you can then put some blue tape on your vehicle. Make sure you cover anything that you're worried about dripping this type of JB Weld on. It can be cleaned up before it hardens, so you don't have to worry about that, but you do not want to have the risk of touching something you don't want to touch. Once you put the blue tape down, you can then sand the area where the tabs are with some 300 grit or 600. If you want, you can go more coarse than that if you're worried about it. But for me, I just stuck with the 300 grit, and that way I can scuff it up and not worry about scratching anything too intensely. Make sure you take your time doing this, prepping the surface and making sure it's all sanded up, and that way when you go to put down the JB Weld, you have the best sanded surface that you can to adhere to. Then make sure you check it over, make sure you're happy with what you did and how much you sanded, and then you could take a piece of cardboard and put it behind there and put pressure on those tabs. That way they can be pressed down onto the fascia, and you can make sure they're aligned with the factory setting area that you had originally before when they were actually molded to the fascia. That way you can have the best chance of keeping your gaps the same with the car, and you can still make it look factory with the repair that you did. Now, I still suggest using these quick tabs, these aluminum ones I have on here, and the reason why I recommend them is it keeps a lot of the weight off of those factory tabs, because the reason that they break off in the first place from the flexion of driving anything that's uneven or any sort of pothole, which will also have the chance of making those tabs flex to the point of losing their strength, going back and forth, up and down, and flexing it. Alright, this epoxy comes in 2 parts, so you're going to use equal of each side, and that way when you go to mix them up, you won't have the issue with having too much hardener in it or too little. Alright, take your time and lay it out on a piece of paper or material you don't mind throwing away. They also do make mixing sheet boards for this in the automotive industry, but if you just want, I was showing you that you could use cardboard. I know it's not the best because sometimes it absorbs the material you're using, but if you're in a pinch, like I said, this is a DIY instructions manual right here on how to do this. So what you're going to do is take a piece of cardboard, we're going to mix it up, and we're going to make sure we just slide it down on the cardboard just like this. That way you make sure that you can evenly spread it out when you go to mix it. Now make sure you don't lose what you're mixing up, the little caps that go on to the 2-part epoxy. This way you can seal them up and use them for another project. These are way bigger than what you need. You just need a small amount. You can always buy the syringe that is easily mixed up and already shows you how much you need to do on each side. That way all you have to do is press down the trigger and then you can dispense it and know that you're going to have equal sides without worrying about if you're putting out too much or too little. And you don't have to worry about buying too much if this is the only project that you're working on. Alright, so now what you're going to do is mix up the JB weld and you're going to want to spread it around. I'm using a piece of cardboard. Now, you usually would use a body filler spreader or something like that, or a popsicle stick. I just wanted to show you, if you don't have anything on hand, this is just one of the ways that you could stir up the JB weld and know that you don't have to run out to the store, or if you're really tight on budget, all you have to do is just rip a piece of cardboard and use that as your spreader. But if you have a bodywork spreader, I recommend using that instead. This is just me trying to show you what you can do to save money, or if you don't have anything at all, or any tools basically besides the epoxy. Now, after you're done kneading it together and stirring it and making sure you stay in one direction when spreading it, so you try to keep any air bubbles out of it, even though it's not body filler, I still treat it like it is. We're going to scoop up a little bit on the edge of this cardboard. We're going to walk over to the edge of the bumper, and now we're going to apply it to the area where the tabs broke off to the fascia. Now take it all the way to the edge, and this way you can spread it on nice and easily. And the blue tape is going to do its job from getting on the rest of the car as you're trying to press it in there, and make sure you don't fill up the holes where the tabs go through, which hold it onto the fender. As you can see, the tabs have a structural shape to them. It looks like a rectangle. Try not to fill that up if you're going to be using the epoxy on there to rebuild any sort of the shape. As you can see, I only put it on the edge where it started to break off. That way I just get the tabs reconnected to the fascia without putting too much product on, which will not allow it to clip back into that fender area, because you got a plastic clip that also goes into the fascia with little hooks, and that's the best way I can describe it, and that's what latches onto your fascia. Now, don't be afraid to use more product. As you see, I keep going back and forth and scooping up more onto my spreader, and this way I can actually have the adequate amount that I need on there. What I do with the spreader is I press it in there and kind of dab it on there. It gets a little stringy as the product starts to dry and cure, as it's a 6-minute set. What I do is I take just enough product that it's like the size of a pea grain stretched out on the edge of your spreader, and that way you don't have too much product and you don't have too little, that you're basically fighting the stringiness for no reason. When you have just enough product, that stringiness kind of keeps itself at bay, and you can press it in there. Now, this is why I like having that blue tape there, because when it does get stringy, it can actually drip down and try to get on the edge of your fascia or fender, and that's why I recommend putting the blue tape down first. Then I take the edge of my spreader and drag it down in a nice straight line. As you can see, those holes are still there where the fascia has those tabs, and that's what you're trying to keep, that original shape. And then you can peel the tape off, and you can see that nothing got underneath. Ignore my car being dirty, I have to wash it. But besides that, pull back. I have a microfiber to wipe anything off on the edge, and then I'll be going around with a little bit of Windex, because Windex pulls things off of the panel without damaging the actual paint. Now, if you do use a degreaser on your paint, make sure it's safe and it's not going to damage it. And also make sure that whatever you're doing, you reapply any sort of UV protecting surfaces that you had on that area if you're using a degreaser. Now, I went back outside. This was 6 hours later after it dried and hardened. As you can see, it kept the shape that it needed. This is why you want to get the full cure time if you can. It's listed as 4 to 6 hours, and I gave 6, even though it was already 80 something degrees outside and low humidity. The good part about this product is it holds itself in place. It doesn't really drip too much. As you could see here, it actually made the shape that we needed and kept the factory holes on the tabs while still repairing the areas that was thinning out. Now we can also see that this cardboard I put in there to hold the pressure on the tabs, to hold it to the fascia, this is what was needed to make sure that you had the clamping that you needed on the two objects when gluing it. Now you can take that piece of cardboard out and take a look at what you did. See if you like how the glue held and everything else like that. It should have full capacity to flex as it's fully been cured. 24 hours is what they recommend for it to sit to, but the 4 to 6 should be the full cure rate, so you can reinstall it and not worry about it. Now, I already clipped it back in. I did it the night before. It's been holding up. I went for a 30-minute drive in the morning, and as you can see, it's still holding up there. It has no problems, and I give it a thumbs up for a repair. Like I said, I recommend those quick metal tabs if you want to get them. I have a little bit of an extra gap between my fender and my fascia because the push bar allowed it to have a little bit of extra give, but that's okay. Yours will be at the same factory length. Now remember to check out my merch for sale. It's up there, and also check out my eBay and see if there's something that you like there. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks again.